Good day, everyone, and good evening. Wish you good teachings, good blessings, and positivity. Hope everyone is staying well. I'm not feeling the greatest right now, but there's something I wanted to discuss. So I'm just going to get right to the point. Over the last few months, we've seen a lot of sideways movements in Bitcoin after a fall off of the $30,000 mark. USD. So that's related to a number of things that I've sort of been alluding to on Instagram, especially the daily news. So we have some sad things that's really going on. Enormous high volume of inflation. It's literally almost a 40-year high. Many people, including myself, didn't perhaps comprehend the gravity of that, right? How fast, because, how fast can inflation negatively affect your household, right? It can creep up really fast. So I want to, bring something to your attention. Over the last few days in Sri Lanka, they had people basically storming the Prime Minister's residence, the person in power of the government, storming their residence because they are facing a 50% hike in inflation. That's extremely steep. And that came about over the last couple of months, literally. So in saying that, at the beginning of the year, the outlook, as it usually is positive for the upcoming year. But then inflation caused some supply chain issues and and vice versa, frankly, right? So I'm not the economic expert. This is not financial advice, but whether you believe the inflation is caused by supply chain or the supply chain is related to the inflation or the cause of inflation, it is getting to a point where supply chain issues are impacting inflation, and inflation perhaps could cause governments to act differently, and in doing so impact inflation negatively for us as individuals. So this is something that's on the watch list for many, including the US federal government, who has put some stringent measures in place to curb inflation through the rapid increase, I might add, of interest rates. So that's a strategy. That's a short-term strategy in order to mitigate some risk of increasing inflation, rapidly increasing inflation. So we have not, many of us have not lived through something like this and know not what to expect. So as I mentioned in, I think, one of my last videos, summer is here. Back then it was June. Right now it's July 12th, 2022. So summer is here, right? Everyone's out having fun. Kids are off from school. There are many distractions out there. However, in the coming weeks and months, we will see, probably an uptick of inflation or a cool down, vice versa. I think with the rapid increase of interest rates, that has put some fear in people's spending habits, including myself. So that's a good thing, because we need to be cognizant of expenditures at all times, right? So it's great to have fun, speaking to myself, but we need to look at where, our investments are, right? Especially in a time like this. So many people would agree that real estate is great. There are other asset classes that deserve some attention as well. So it's looking for that needle in the haystack, right? So billionaires today, normally they would follow a 60-40 portfolio, right? I think 60% REITs and 40% bonds, if I'm saying that correctly. I don't have my notes in front of me, but it's, in terms of investing, it's the typical 60-40 rule. That doesn't apply in today's world, right? So the 60-40 rule was sort of meant to take a position on inflation to beat inflation, right? So the investment was there to outpace the inflation that we've seen over the past few decades, right? But the inflation was calm, it was minimal, right? The US dollar has been losing its value in terms of power over the past few decades, and we are aware of that. However, at the rapid pace of inflation in today's world, it's very concerning, and that's why the Fed has to increase interest rates as rapidly as possible. However, there will come a point in time where that will have an adverse effect on the economy, economies of scale. So billionaires, investors, they are aware of this. They are aware that the 60-40 rule is not going to be, much use for them. So they have to look outside the box, right? So there's a bank that came out today. I think one of the world's governing banks. I don't have my notes and just wanted to get this off my chest. But one of the world's governing banks allowed, within the last couple of days, allowed banks to, keep 1% of their assets in Bitcoin. Now that's very minuscule. However, it's a step forward in a direction that I've been speaking on for the past few months, right? So this is very an integral, crucible moment where we are seeing that, eyes wide open situation, right? So the inflation is there. All of a sudden, within the matter of 6 months, inflation has kicked in to be a 40-year high. And that's, I believe, for us, right? Or, for mainly North America. However, when I look at countries like Sri Lanka, 50% inflation, that hurts. That hurts. Looking at basic needs, right? Food, water, sustainability, infrastructure, right? Those are, might be degraded as a result of the high inflation, right? A lot of people are not in a position to create more wealth in terms of create or produce more income, right, to beat inflation. So what we're seeing right now is a global economic catastrophe that's unfolding. And some might add, or some might argue that it's unfolding at a devastatingly rapid pace, right? If you look between what's between the lines of what's going on, 50%, inflation in Sri Lanka. We've experienced this in Venezuela. We've observed this over the past decade. Lebanon, right? I remember about 8 years ago, similar situation. Even today, those countries that I mentioned just a moment ago, they're also, their inflation is increasing as well. So it doesn't stop. And that brings us back to obviously crypto and Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a sound form of digital gold, if you will. It's very scarce and it's encryption based. So it's very new to a lot of people because it requires technology such as wallets, hack-proof, two-factor authentication. It's very technological. And there's about 2 billion people in the world that does not have currently, banking opportunities, but they do have internet. So this could be something for them that they can look forward to in times when there's crisis and you're looking for deflationary assets, in the sense that the asset itself, the supply is being cut every, 4 years, for example, as Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin Cash example. So you're looking for assets which are blue chip assets, blue chip crypto assets that are set to be, deflationary every so often, right? Programmatically. So the supply of that digital coin is very limited. So one of the most adopted crypto today is obviously Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has suffered, quite the downside, which we would allude to as a bear market. Now, this could be a cyclical bear market in the sense that, this is related to maybe a temporary setback in an overall bull or positive environment, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, right? Being probably the most successful asset class over the last decade, right? So what we're seeing right now is, folks, that at the beginning of the year, the intent was for the miners, the mining operations were funded by large institutions, right? So if you're a miner and you're mining for Bitcoin, et cetera, you have your equipment set up, you might be sponsored by an entity that says, hey, you know what, we want to be a venture capitalist. We want to invest with you, right? You've got the operations, you've got the know-how. We don't want you to sell your Bitcoin to front your operations. So here you go. We're going to have a partnership so that you don't have to sell your Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, we want to also partner so that we can profit. And that started diminishing when within the crypto world, certain exchanges started losing their leverage, their power, their staying power, right? Due to DeFi and some of the probably, if you would call it, fraudulent or activities within the DeFi, Celsius being one of them, collapsing, 3 Arrows Capital, another one that's filing for bankruptcy. So, for example, if you bought Bitcoin at $500 and all of a sudden it's $60,000, great. You have some capital that you can borrow against, perhaps, right? You can, these companies started their own investing management company, wealth management company. So, and then, from 60,000, they were making and developing a business plan, putting together a business plan of sustainability, in the sense that, okay, great, now we got to pay marketing, we got to pay, we got to hire the experts, we've got to, ensure that we have a great website. All of that takes, well thought out planning, and it has a cost to it, especially the marketing aspect. It has a cost to it. So, when I look at what's happening and transpiring over the past 30 days, obviously on June 9th, Bitcoin was trading around $30,000. And now we see it at, struggling at $19,000 US. It perhaps could go lower. And it's very oversold. It's extremely oversold right now. So that means usually it's it's a fantastic opportunity to buy. But this is also dependent on the global financial position, right? What's happening globally? So we have a war that's happening. We had an outage, unrelated to the war, but it's very devastating, I'm sure, for cybersecurity and risk management in terms of the, in Canada, one of the main internet service providers have lost internet connectivity, so for their customers, for over 12 hours. I don't think I've seen that before. So we are in the midst of a cyber war, and countries that are participating in the assistance of Ukraine will probably see some retaliation in the form of cybersecurity breaches, etc. So that was very devastating. We have a number of things that's transitioning right now. We are looking at the fiat system, looking weaker and weaker as we see it. So also on the map is the euro. So I believe the euro is at the, parity with the US dollar, right? That when the euro came up, maybe about 20 years ago, sometime within that time frame, it was very strong. But that's starting to lose power, right? Currently, people are flocking towards the US dollar. So the US dollar is gaining some momentum, gaining some strength, especially over the Canadian dollar, quite rapidly, right? And this reminds me of long time ago when this recession hits, the US dollar is a favorite amongst many investors, right? It's the go-to. However, there's a new up and coming champion called Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin right now, because of its technologically advanced in nature, it's more difficult to access by certain people, right? Globally, right? So there's that impact as well. Also, there's not many, very clear regulation laws coming from the SEC at this current point in time. However, this is how the internet unfolded back in the day, right? So it's sort of going along that same adoption curve. We're still extremely very early. We had some booms and busts. We had different cycles in Bitcoin. Where we're at right now, these Bitcoin miners are, selling Bitcoin, unfortunately, because the value has dropped so significantly. Their venture capitalists are also looking at that, saying, hey, you know what, maybe we'll check you next year. We'll come back when things are better, but take my money back, right? Now, these Bitcoin miners perhaps have no choice, so they're being selling on average of 127 Bitcoin to exchanges per day. Now, if you send your Bitcoin to an exchange, that can mean a number of things. Speculatively speaking, 14% of the Bitcoin rewards they earn per day is being sold. So they're not selling everything. What we do see is that impact of the downside in terms of price action, right? But they're keeping 80% of their Bitcoin. So they're not selling everything, right? So if you have 100 Bitcoin, maybe they might shave off, 30% of that. That assists with costs, maybe costs outside of an agreement, but again, if the venture capitalist firm decides to pull out because now they need, in terms of the global catastrophe, economic catastrophe, they need their funds, maybe they might come to an agreement to say, hey, you know what, now is not the time. I'm going to have to dial back 10%, dial back maybe 15, 20%. Now, if these Bitcoin miners, if they have such agreement with several players, right, and each player dials back 10%, that can have a lasting negative impact on the said company that went into this, right, for profitability. So we've seen over the last few months, there's a lot of layoffs in terms of the crypto exchanges. There's a lot of bankruptcies. So all of this have some negative impact on the price action. So now that's a compounded effect, right? There's fear in the market, interest rates are rising, US dollars gaining momentum, gaining some strong momentum, but there's no telling how long this can go on for. But as long as it continues to be around the $20,000 mark, they probably have no choice but to continue to sell. And that may last, it could last up to 6 months or so, right? But anything is possible. Any material move higher by Bitcoin from here will likely lead to a quick decline in selling. So for any given reason, Bitcoin could literally say, and what we're thinking right now when I do my analysis, it sounds like Bitcoin could probably go back to around the $25,000, $28,000 mark, probably, albeit temporarily, perhaps, and there's more to come out of the woodworks, right? So even if a rise to $30,000, that will effectively cut miners selling by 1/3 from today's price level. But Bitcoin is still strong, fundamentally speaking, as I've alluded to, and this is just a great buying opportunity. The problem is not many people have a lot of capital to just, throw at Bitcoin right now. It's a very risk on asset, if I'm saying that correctly. So it's a very liquid market, that's for sure. So any fear in the market, guess what? People are going to sell, right? Regular individuals, etc. But there's always going to be somebody who buys that at some point. Somebody's watching, somebody's going to buy it, right? So the Bitcoin Cash was a sort of like an evolution of Bitcoin back in 2017 with the developers. So it's something to keep your eyes on. And at one point, it was parity. It was on par with Bitcoin. Excuse me. It was, I think, about $4,000, back in 2017, and there was a big debacle. It's risen to around 1,600, I believe. Now it's about $100. It was a fork of Bitcoin itself. This is just perhaps a minor blip, but the Bitcoin halving is coming up in about 2 years, right? So that means the supply will get cut, guaranteed, in 2 years, as well as Bitcoin Cash, right? So even though miners are selling right now, Bitcoin miners are selling, they're perhaps going to use the next few months to re-strategize, build partnerships, collaborate with other players in the industry. This takes some time, and then develop a winning strategy so that they won't have to sell Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is known to drop 80, 90% even. And we're right now, an 80% drop from the all-time high would put us about 12,000 US. Right now we're seeing 17,000 US. We have seen that, right? So this could be just a downside spike to the downside, and then it just bumps back up, right? So catching that 17 or 12,000 may not be even possible unless you have something programmed to say, I'm going to buy automatically. So bot trading, right? Riot Blockchain 8 or Hut 8 Mining, Bit Digital have each secured a shelf offering to issue shares. Through the process, they'll raise anywhere from 500 million to 700 million. On the private side, we recently saw more promising capital raises. Crusoe Energy recently raised 505 million in venture capital funding, and Prime Block went public via 1.3 billion SPAC deal. So the ability to raise capital has surely slowed with Bitcoin's recent leg down. However, this is a sign that financiers are, chomping at the bit to keep funding Bitcoin mining when Bitcoin recovers, right? There's a dwindling supply of newly issued Bitcoin hitting the market. So they're getting prepared, because once that supply gets cut in 2 years or less, actually now, less than 2 years, that Bitcoin supply will get cut in half. And then what? So the preparation begins now. For individuals, dollar cost averaging, for organizations, small businesses, this is their way of hedging against inflation. Going back to my point at the beginning, this is being looked at as a real hedge against inflation, right? Warren Buffett, when his favorite stocks go down and at a 50% discount, this guy is buying all of it, right? The catalyst to Bitcoin will perhaps be the Bitcoin credit card rewards, which could account for 276 Bitcoin in new demand per day, right? So sure, they're selling 127 per day over the last while, but that's temporary. And this is not going to occur permanently, right? There's nothing fundamentally wrong with Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash uses less power than Bitcoin, in fact, right? So this whole debacle last year, and these big players coming in and talking about, we need to see proof of work being migrated to, proof of stake due to the energy cost. Like Bitcoin Cash was already there. Like if you do your research, you'll see it. So even owning 2-3 Bitcoin Cash, and you just sit on that doesn't cost. It costs $100 US at today's price, right? You just never know what can happen. right? So I intend to, repurchase. That's I also was in a situation where I had to sell. We all come across that at some point in time, and you sell at a loss, right? So that's a learning lesson for next time, right? When the tide is high, take some cream off the top, right? That's what I've been told, but sometimes I could be of the mindset that I just hold it forever, right? So go up and down, but it depends on how much you actually leverage, so you don't want to over leverage in your investment, diversify investments. It's a very precarious time. So the billionaires are out there buying Ferraris, they're buying real estate, they're buying scarcity assets, Rolex, we've seen an uptick in that. Now they're probably leaning towards the US dollar as well as those assets that I mentioned, right? Including Bitcoin, right? So the younger Americans, will be inheriting, up to 68 trillion from their parents. A certain portion of that inheritance, will go to the crypto lab, right? Beginning with Bitcoin, right? So, and they wait, they're not going to wait for the government to just print money and, wait for retirement. I don't think they are that naive enough to think that, maybe 50 years from now, when they're ready for retirement, that the government's going to come and save them, especially in light of 50% inflation hikes in some countries. And it's as if no one cares, right? But I care. And I just want to send this message out there that, keep the faith. I've experienced a lot of ups and downs and emotional ups and downs, speaking as which from this market, and it can be devastating at times, right? But I've come through it with the help of great people by my side, so I thank them enormously. But this is a very fragile market at this point in time, in a sense that we went from $3 trillion back down to less than 1 trillion, right? So I call that a fragile market in my mind. But the fundamentals are there, it's strong. This will eliminate and filter out a lot of fake companies, right? A lot of fake pop-ups, overnight get rich quick schemes. It's going to probably bring us back to basics in terms of, I just want to, invest in real solid blue chip cryptos or stocks even, right? In terms of stocks, you're looking at Amazon, Tesla, probably maybe Uber, Pfizer, Amazon, right? Microsoft, perhaps. So brings us back to those. So anything else, you probably just, people won't throw their money at that, right? Now, companies are buying Bitcoin to hold in their treasuries. There might come a day where, especially after the last few months, there might come a day where if they hold Bitcoin in their treasuries, great. They may have to release that. MicroStrategy doubled down on Bitcoin, taking advantage of the sell-off to scoop up around 500 BTC. I did a quick math. Today's price, if I were to buy 1,000 Bitcoin Cash, so BCH, 1,000 BCH, right, which is literally a fork of Bitcoin itself, that's going to cost, I think, around 127,000, right? So that's I do that for fun sometimes, looking at the equation. Because what would it be like to own 1,000 BTC, right? Well, the next best thing is maybe 1,000 Bitcoin Cash, right? Being held at a very trustworthy source. But, that's something I look at saying, wow, because this was at one point on par with Bitcoin itself. Now, when the world wakes up to Bitcoin Cash and says, wow, they are more energy efficient than Bitcoin itself, and they didn't need an extra layer on top of Bitcoin itself, such as Lightning Network, to function, well, I think it's just a matter of, common sense that somebody's going to adopt it, especially when you look at 50% inflation. If I look at countries right now, they're aiming to adopt Bitcoin, right? They're going to adopt Bitcoin. Whether countries decide to adopt other cryptocurrencies, that's up to them. Time will tell. Survival of the fittest, right? But the most energy efficient out of the two is Bitcoin Cash. Now, in 2014, 2011 to 2014, Mt. Gox, that exchange got hacked. And there was, probably 140,000 Bitcoin that was stolen. The feds recovered it and brought it back to, the table, but it was very secured. So they kept it. And after several years of litigation, they are going to release it next month. So unfortunately, I guess they're releasing it, or maybe fortunately, they're releasing it at a time where it's at its lowest. That could be seen as, okay, I would expect and anticipate some volatility. If anyone who invested that long ago for a couple $100 and now they get their Bitcoin, they're going to have a few Bitcoin and it's worth $20,000 today. Guess what? Before that, and anything can happen, before that goes to the downside for 10, 12,000 US, they might just shave a bit of cream off the top, because to them, they got in extremely early, 7 years ago, right? That's way before Bitcoin Cash was ever created, etc. We still have litigation from XRP. So these things take time. It takes years, maybe sometimes even, decades, but at some point, a resolution has to be met, and a way forward is in place. So we have we expect central banks to be a prominent demand driver for Bitcoin. They'll want to hold some on their balance sheets, right, as it transforms into a primary base layer of the global financial system, right? So imagine that, right? When everyone's looking at the fiat, the regular dollar, eroding in terms of buying power, right? Sure, the US dollar is creeping up right now, but that the next asymmetrical bet, when you're looking at and reading something, what I have on the screen right now, tells you that it's just a matter of time till big players start adopting, like global central banks, right? Holding some, right? So that's why, for my followers, I thank you for listening and spending the time. Usually I try to keep it short, post daily updates perhaps on my Instagram, and then maybe some more in-depth conversations here on YouTube. But it's going to be definitely, so I thank you for viewing, and it's survival of the fittest, right? So I want to share this as well. So this is 2010, 2014, 2016, 2020. Right, so in 2020, Bitcoin crashed to $3,000, and it went through the halving as well shortly after that. So in March 2020, Bitcoin crashed to around 3,000 US, and it was hovering. We had a hard time with COVID and the global shutdown, still upon us, by the way. So China is still doing lockdowns, and COVID is still rampant and spreading throughout countries. But as I said, we've experienced this before. Last year, things were great. Nobody cared. The majority of people didn't really care. They were just out there having a good summer. And then come the fall, when lockdowns happen, right? So now there's frameworks in place for lockdowns. The government knows what to do, how to keep everyone safe and home. That does have a financial impact on the economy, negatively speaking, right? So I would probably presume that things like that should be anticipated and expected in the future, within the next at least 2 years. But now, being one of the downtimes, sideways movements in Bitcoin, if you look at the arrows, perhaps after the first halving, it really spiked 11,000%. Look at the last halving, 2,000%. Now this is just the Bitcoin jump in price, right? 2,000% is quite a lot when you looked at, from 2020 to where we are now, right? Had anybody bought and kept and secured back here in 2018 or 2020? So these are the bear market. I remember this one here in 2018. Look at the bottom here. These were depressing times. This was like, oh my God. But it was times when I had to say, look, I'm taking a risk. I'm going to put some money in this market. And then yes, it actually went sideways and then it went up for a minute. So we can see the price action here increasing here, right? So that's it. I'll pause and I'll come back to you in a moment. Hello? Who is it? Yeah, come. Okay, so let's look down here. If a miner has enough cash on hand to survive until the halving ushers in the next bull market, we believe that there's a strong case for continuing to hold it through the market volatility, right? You just have to make it through, and the profits on the other side for survivors will be tremendous, right? So going back to this chart here of 2000%, we could literally almost, there's talks that within 8 years, 5 years, $1 million Bitcoin, $500,000 Bitcoin by 2025. So 18, 20, you're going to see those numbers perhaps play out. Now that's dependent on a number of factors. Right now, as I mentioned, the US dollars, the go-to, right? The Canadian dollars, sort of being devalued by the US. So that means our inflation is getting higher and our dollars just worth less and less, right? So it's at the lowest in comparison to the US in a while. So just make it through the end, wait till the next halving, it's 2 years away. It seems like a long time, but patience, understanding, and persistence, there's a lot of people impacted right now in today's society. They have others to care for within their family. So, it's not easy, right, to even invest, especially during these times, right? But, that's why I look at something like Bitcoin Cash, right? For $100 US right now, I'm not a financial advisor, but for $100 US, you can literally buy one whole Bitcoin Cash, right? Which has a limited supply of 21 million, and it's been around for about 5 years, since 2017, right? It was originally a fork of Bitcoin. So if I look at, when the feds are going to release the Bitcoin that was stolen or hacked and stolen several years ago, they're going to actually release that to the rightful owners. That when they release that to the rightful owners, a rightful owner has 3 options to choose: USD, Bitcoin, as in BTC, or Bitcoin Cash. And I was extremely surprised to read that, and I posted that on my Instagram, 911 Lambo. I was extremely surprised to see that the federal government would allow another option. So in terms of another crypto, right? So Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, or you can have the equivalent in US dollars. So I would assume that people might do they might keep 60% of it, ditch 40% because they made a lot of money. They can enjoy their lifestyle. That's probably the first thing that they will do. Try to beat this inflation, put some cash in the bank, etc. So that there could be some selling, and that could have a negative impact on the Bitcoin price even further, right? So there's a lot of things happening to Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the asymmetrical bet, 10 years ago, right? Bitcoin Cash could be that as well. So for these individuals that lost their Bitcoin earlier on, they may have the option to buy Bitcoin Cash as a store of value, and also maybe a USD or a combination of all three. Maybe they won't be able to choose just one. They may have all three. Okay, so what's the most rapid option for building a cash position for the Bitcoin miners? The most immediate strategy is to sell their Bitcoin. So they mine however many Bitcoin per day. Guess what? They sell a percentage, like 30% of it, right? We are seeing some Bitcoin digital miners take that path. Others will turn to raising capital, right? Look for other venture capitalists out there, so that would be in a better position to fund them as long as they can execute well on their business plan, or if their business plan is basically fail safe, right? So there's a lot that's happening there. So there's a few people that will take that route, and they'll have to work harder than before, right? So if they're going to seek capital, any venture capitalist that is, contemplating, funding these Bitcoin mining operations, they're going to have to really come with a very solid strategic business plan on how they plan to successfully operate during the downtimes, right? What are their future plans? As we've seen, many crypto companies came, hired a bunch of people, things were looking great, the price action was amazing, so they inject that, they probably made some money, sell it, injected into the business, hired a bunch of people, kept some Bitcoin in the treasury. However, the pullback from 60,000 or 69,000 US back to 17,000 US, that hurts. That hurts. So whatever Bitcoin that they had, now they don't have any other capital. They have to generate new income by way of building their audience, building their customer base, right? Their customer base is probably not too interested in spending much money in crypto these days. It's just wait and see. So they're not, if you're not trading, these crypto companies are not making much capital, right? For some of them. However, Binance might be the exception. They have eliminated some trading fees, etc., especially with Bitcoin and the US dollar. These guys are just amazing. They're doing some great things. Now, they had some setbacks with the regulators, and they were allowing certain countries to do business with them. Some countries, from what I hear, were part of, some restrictions, etc. So that's typically frowned upon by the SEC, perhaps, or the government itself. So they can't deal with countries that have been sort of, put financial measures in place. So that's all. This goes back to regulation. It goes back to a lot of different things. So we're still early in the game, remember. So that's my 2 cents. But things are progressing, right? They have to, the governments have to be able to understand what entities are utilizing what tool for their operations, right? So this is very serious, and that's why we see the call for action in terms of studying this whole crypto base from the governments, and to get a more clarity and transparency into what's going on, right? Who are the individuals or companies that are doing any trades, right? Where are they sending this Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. So it's good to have governance on that, right? Because it could really be like a runaway horse. But it does take patience to stomach through the ups and downs and the volatility, etc. So any Bitcoin miners that can raise capital now will be in better shape by the time the next bull run cycle begins, right? So we'll continue to view this capital raising strategy as adventurous for cash-strapped miners. But that's for any probably small business, right? Now is the time where, as a small business, you have to look at your business operations and say, what do I want to spend on, or how do I generate new revenue, right? How do I provide more value for the dollar, right? Value for the buck, right? So even myself, I will probably come up with a strategy at some point to delve deeper into that zone, right? But for now, I'm happy doing what I'm doing now, providing, my viewers some interesting discoveries, and it actually does take me a while to kind of go through, and there's so much information that I come across that I just don't have the time to go through this in about 20 minutes. So thank you for your patience once again. Looking at this, the cost to mine per Bitcoin. And as I read this out loud, I just think back to the same equipment that is used to mine Bitcoin can be used to mine Bitcoin Cash. So here we are. And this is exactly what I said a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. If the cost is too high for Bitcoin, to mine Bitcoin, they just have to flip a switch, or probably simultaneously mine something like Bitcoin Cash and put that in their reserves, knowing that Bitcoin Cash could really see a very, steep asymmetrical upward movement, right? So 6 years ago, Bitcoin was about $400 US. Nobody would have ever thought possible that it's 20,000, right? Much less 69,000 at its very peak. So the next 12 months is going to be very interesting as companies, go through all of this business schematics, right? How much are they paying to mine Bitcoin? What is their cash run rate? Short-term investments, untapped capital, what resources do they have over the next 12 months, right? So it's going to be probably a recession being declared over the next 6 months. At some point, things where, they might have lockdowns. It's going to be cold in the northern parts of North America. We may see similar things that happened before. Machine leases, construction, expansion plans. Right? So how long can a company's current cash stash last, right? So these are things that all executives for all companies in the cryptoverse they're contemplating right now, right? Do we have a healthy balance sheet, right? We have cash, but can we get through the next 2 years? That's all they really have to do, maybe 2.5 years, right? Because the action doesn't happen at the halving. It happens probably about 6 months after that. So 2020, this was there. This period here, it started beginning upticking. So 2021, January, we said, wow, it's just going crazy. Now we come down, might even test somewhere, 15 grand US. We already hit 17,000. But yeah, if they can stomach that for the next 2 years at least, then great. Voyager Digital, they have a harder hill to climb. So, down 86, down 98% on Voyager. I don't know what Voyager's plans are, but you never know, right? Position size 200 to 1,000 per idea. So that means not over leveraging, right? Probably going to skip this. Mara Digital. Okay. So this company here, they're using their capital. They're using their capital to acquire new machines as opposed to spending its money building out the infrastructure and power sources to operate its business. Marathon relies on third parties to host and power its machines. So they can buy the machine, send it perhaps to any other country that has a better cost per kilowatt, right? Send it over there, set up shop and switch it on. Now you're mining Bitcoin in a cheap environment, right? So that's kind of what they're probably doing. If they are mining for 6,700 per Bitcoin, that's amazing. 66% discount from Bitcoin's current price of time of writing. That's great, right? So that company looks like it's doing great. They have been extremely aggressive in acquiring new machines. It currently has one of the largest mining machine fleets out of any publicly traded miner, with 36,000 machines deployed, producing about 3.9 exahash per second. Computer, that's about 1.9% of the global hash rate. Wow. So these guys, companies like this, you'll probably hear of them in about 5 years. Like, who's Marathon? What happened? Where'd they pop up from? But they were keeping quiet, keeping their head down, and staying in their lane. They're making progress to have 200,000 machines up and running by the beginning of 2023. So this downturn in the market is not going to affect them negatively, right? They just buy more machines. They'll figure out where to throw it later. Not a bad idea, to be honest with you. Mining Bitcoin is like printing money anyways. Okay. Okay, so Marathon seems to be doing great. But I'm going to skip over some of this. So you can buy that up to $50. Riot blockchain, second largest Bitcoin miner per market cap. Now, all these, went down, 85, 98%, etc. I think from all-time highs, but they have a great business strategy, right? So reading something like this, you will see, if this is part of a business plan, you'll see venture capitalists flock to this, right? Because, especially this company at the top here, they have a strategy in place to mine Bitcoin less than what it costs, right? So currently it costs someone 19,000 or $20,000 US to buy it. They can create it for 6,600, less than 7,000, and sell it if they want, or they just hold on to it, or they sell 30%. So that's why we're seeing some sell-off in the market, but it doesn't mean that fundamentally anything is wrong with Bitcoin. It's being adopted, it's being prepared for by governments, by regulators, by the operators of compliance, right? So the current cost to mine is 13,500. That's for this company here. So that's great. It's still very it's still lower than Bitcoin itself. Okay. Okay, so in this scenario, Riot blockchain, 575 million of revenue as profit. Add that to its current equity as retained earnings, and Riot would have a book value of 1.9 billion, right? $23 per share. That's a 450% above today's level. So what is the recommendation? Buy Riot blockchain up to $50. And that's, I believe this is a stock, right? So as we go lower and lower, you know, the higher companies were at the top. This one, like this guy sold 3,000 Bitcoin for 62 million. 3,000 Bitcoin, 62 million. It used 28 million of that to reduce its credit facility, with Galaxy Digital down to 38 million owed. So basically what happened here is Bitfarm, and I'm pretty sure they're popular, but anyways, Bitfarm, they have 9 data centers across Canada, US, Paraguay, and also making quick progress in building data centers in Argentina. Bitfarm sports a hash rate of 3.4 exahash across 36,700 machines. Okay. So the cost to mine is 8,700, but they had to sell some. They sold 3,000 Bitcoin for 62 million, took 28 million of that to reduce its credit facility, right? So now they owed, that much, and now they reduced that, right? Global fiscal tightening. That's what we're seeing right now, right? That's when recession fears are here. They want to take some cream off the top and pay down their debts. That's what actually a lot of individuals are currently doing right now, increasing their credit scores. So likewise, businesses would face the same, sort of similar strategy. Okay, so they're sitting on 404 million liquidity. Okay, should Bitcoin return to $60,000, they can earn 394 million in revenue and profit 220 million from that should Bitcoin return to 60,000. So this is what everyone's looking at, right? It already hit 60,000. We're just going to have to wait 2 to 5 years for another go at the 60,000 and remain there comfortably. But that's what 220 million would sound great, right? So as a venture capitalist, they will say, hey, you know what? I see you've mapped this out. You can stand to gain 220 million. Sure, I'll support you and fund you. I'll be one of the investors, right? That's what these guys will say. Anyways, buy up to $10, according to this article. So I don't know what this is right now, buy up to $10. But anyways, I think I've covered most of what I intended to cover. Let's quickly, Gala is another one that it's a favorite amongst many for the metaverse. So that's about 5 cents right now. Excuse me. And we could probably see a good movement upwards. Back in last year, I think this was like 40 cents. As you can see here, it was 85 cents right now. So for 5 cents, it's a great deal. You don't have to throw a lot of money in this environment at the current price to potentially make some money in the future, right? So the dollar index here, right? Here's a US dollar index hit 108, a new high since October 2002. Due to strong dollar, more and more people are fleeing from stocks, metals, and crypto into the dollar. So the dollar up, everything else, stocks, crypto, metals down. This, as you can see here, that can have a very into 2023. So crypto is a very brand new asset class, right? Not many people are going to probably have faith in it at this point in time. and it will take probably, into 2023, maybe even 2024, the end of 2024 going into 2025, then perhaps Bitcoin will wake up, and so will the rest of the world. That says, hey, you know what, Bitcoin is actually gaining momentum on the US dollar. But for the next 2 years, we have to sit tight on that one, because it could be very, next 6 months consolidation, sideways action, new regulations that may throw out some of the 20,000 cryptos that's out there, right? But the US dollar in a recession, because it's currently the global reserve currency of the world, we could see that upward movement into 2023, 24. So diversification of assets, that's some good information to have even for myself, who could say, well, maybe some diversification into a US dollar might be a good thing, right? That's how it used to be back in the days, right? Especially if you're in any country other than the US, right? Caribbean, they adopt US dollar. In Canada, I've seen people adopt the US dollar in the sense that they move their assets into USD during times of recession, because it's good hedge against the Canadian dollar, that is, right? So we haven't seen this since October 2002. October 2002, roughly, then that was a recession, because as you remember, 9/11 the year before, and when that occurred, it had a negative economic impact. And rest in peace to all the souls and the lives that were lost and torn apart since that event. But that was very devastating, and it took perhaps, like, naturally a year, 6 months to a year to feel that impact on the economy. So the US dollar rose to a high, and we haven't seen that since 2002, as this chart depicts here, right? So lots of things happening. Bitcoin is trying to hold a certain position. Right, looking for anything interesting. So, one last thing I want to show you. Okay, so this is some other comp, comp might see a quick pump there, but I just want to keep it to Bitcoin right now. I found this rather interesting. The 2018 bear market, bottom fractal, the one in the blue is where we're currently at. So we're actually, a lot of people say that we're in a bear market, etc. So this is actually following this to a T, right? It went up to 21,000, even 22,000 for a bit, and then it just dropped down to less than 20,000, around 19,500, going back up. This might be a bit sideways for a bit, but oddly, the current price movement is mimicking that of 2018. So as you recall, 2018 was a bear market, very devastating. Nobody cared about Bitcoin, the mass majority at that time. And you'll find, you'll hear articles that Bitcoin is dead. But then look what happened. So if we were to play a repeat, and I don't know, I don't have any exact time frames, but this could go up to $28,000 and then maybe start coming back down. And I don't have the access to the rest of the chart. Yeah, Cardano might take a dip. That's it for now. So just wanted to show you guys some of these details, and I appreciate you spending the time with me to go through some of those charts and to listen to and to hear me out in terms of Bitcoin mining and the operations and what's happening in today's world with inflation and so on and so forth. So thank you all for your time, and it's a pleasure being here this evening. I wish you nothing but the best, and I'll come back when I have some more info. Okay. All right. Take care.